higher prices for somewhat longer. And the reason they did that is related to Russia-Ukraine, actually, which is they were worried about the absolute, actually getting hold of stuff. So the farm I was on last week said they bought fertiliser further forward than they would normally do, locked in a higher price than that. Now, I think that should, I think you're right.
Seguimos escuchando a Andrew Bailey, que está hablando de dos razones, de dos motivos que están conllevando esta subida de los precios de la comida. Primero, habla del impacto de los precios de la energía y segundo, muy relacionado también con este primer punto, habla de la guerra entre Rusia y Ucrania, que él aduce de alguna forma, dice que son los motivos que están provocando esta subida de precios en los productos más básicos, sobre todo en los productos alimenticios.
Well, I would echo a lot of the things that have already been said. It is very difficult to forecast at very high frequencies some of the developments that we've seen, given the magnitude of the shocks and their pass-through.
But to take an example, in the Governor's letter to us, which we're publishing today, it's now listed as a fourth shock, this food price rise, added to the list of other shocks that we've heard in evidence from you before, and linked obviously to what happened with Russia's evil invasion of Ukraine, and yet now it's being listed as a shock when it's something that's been known about for well over a year. And so my question really is, why have you been so wrong in terms of your forecast of inflation? Because a margin of error of 0.8 when your target is only 2, you're basically completely the errors are so huge relative to your target that it just undermines people's confidence in your ability to tackle inflation.
Well, perhaps I can sort of take the 2 points slightly separately. In terms of the aggregate outlook for inflation.
Ahora mismo vemos cómo están preguntando que por qué no han previsto, por qué no han hecho una predicción de lo que podía suponer esta guerra entre Rusia y Ucrania y sobre todo la incidencia, la influencia que podía tener en los precios de los productos alimenticios, y vamos a ver cómo contesta.
Unacceptably high, well above target. And I think that's a reflection of the magnitude of the shocks that we have faced over the past year, 18 months and so forth.
But the Governor told us a year ago that the impact on food prices of the invasion was apocalyptic. It made headlines at the time, but that was a word that was used. And so for you to be now surprised by the impact on inflation seems to us to be a surprise.
Right. I think the point I would make, and this will lead in, I think, to some of the discussion we'll have in a second around the rationalisation of recent policy decisions. I think the point I would make is that the magnitude of these shocks has not only affected directly on inflation, but it's also affected how the pass-through of these shocks may be transmitted through the value chain. So the indirect effects of energy price rises, for example, may have been different and had more magnified effects. And also, as is well known, the second round effects, which are feeding through in other costs that are faced by food producers. So I think what is crucial is our baseline forecasting framework is based or developed from the experience of the last 30 years of inflation targeting. That's a period where we haven't been exposed to shocks of the magnitude we've seen, be they the energy price shock or the food price shocks, or indeed some of the shocks to international goods prices we saw in the aftermath of the pandemic with the supply disruptions that were associated with that. And I think there's a sort of difficult question, this is the question we face in our forecasting, is whether the models and forecasting frameworks that we've developed on the basis of the experience over the last 30 years, whether they capture possible changes in behaviour given the magnitude of these shocks. So I gave a talk a few weeks ago around how to understand the notion of persistence, which is very key to the way we view inflation, precisely because given the lags in monetary policy transmission that are built into the sort of technology of the policy that we have responsibility for. When we change policy today, as you know, and this is why forecasts are so key to our framework, we are trying to ensure that we have the appropriate effect on inflation developments at the time those lags unwind.
So Hugh, are you saying that despite the Bank of England having been in existence for over 300 years, you only look at the last 30 years when you think about what the risks are to inflation?
Well, no, but I think it is crucial that the regime we have been in the last